Let's just walk through that a second. So that's a biological metaphor. So let's just walk through that a minute, just to show exactly how wrong it is. Okay, so now there's lots of situations in which the use of biological metaphors can shed light on human nature and even the nature of human, what would you say, striving and thriving. So psychologists use mouse models all the time, and that's partly because the neurochemistry of a mouse brain, for example, is very similar to the neurochemistry of a human brain. There's all sorts of analogs in behavior and function that are relevant. But the Malthusian doctrine is based on a very low-level analogy. So the analogy is essentially this. If you put a microorganism in a Petri dish, so it has enough agar, enough food substrate so that it can thrive, it will multiply to the point where, and rapidly, geometrically or exponentially, to the point where it consumes all of its resources, and then it will catastrophically collapse. Okay, and you can see that same thing occurring in some natural populations. If you provide a natural population with no predation and a plethora of resources in a constrained environment, then the population will grow until it consumes all the resources and collapse. Okay, so why aren't people microorganisms in a Petri dish? Well, there are some constraints on what we can produce and consume. Like there's different, what would you say, scarcity of different fundamental elements, for example, such that some things will always be more expensive than others, or almost always. There's some natural scarcity, but here's the fundamental difference between human beings and other creatures. So we can innovate, and we can produce variants of ourselves that can die instead of us. So on the innovation front, and these things are tied together, because we can think, because we can transform cognitively, we don't have to die or vary genetically. We can transform cognitively. That's our niche. And the fact that we can transform cognitively means that we can make constant scarcity into variable plenitude. And we've done that constantly. Things we regard as natural resources, hydrocarbons, for example, oil, gas, those things were of zero value in 1820. Zero. They weren't natural resources at all. It wasn't until we figured out how to use them, how to substitute them for whale oil, for example, that they became this unbelievable source of wealth that was immediately available everywhere. It was a cognitive transformation and revolution. And there's no end to the degree to which we can use that cognitive revolution to increase plenitude. And that's exactly why, for example, that every baby born today will produce 7 times as much as they consume. Now, you might say at some scale, there's going to be some limit to plenitude, but it isn't obvious at all that what that's going to be. And it certainly isn't obvious that we've reached that limit. And that's especially true when you consider the possibility of computation, because we're in this situation now where our computing resources, which take up, comparatively little resources and energy, are multiplying at a rate that's absolutely beyond comprehension. And we have no idea how much we're going to know in 10 years. So the Malthusian notion, there isn't anything about the Malthusian notion that's correct, except for yeast and bacteria. And, if you're going to treat people like yeast and bacteria, then we're going to be in the same damn situation that we're in now, right? Where we have to justify our existence by data because the world is full of scarcity, and maybe only the elites who have our best interests in mind are going to be allowed to thrive.